gentlemen, I was very fortunate to grow up with a great man, my father. My father was my hero my whole life. Now, my father was cool in that kind of classic way, you know? Like he dressed very nice, always had nice hair, an impeccable outfit. He served in the Navy, and he served as a CB, which was a construction battalion, which I would later find out were the MacGyvers of the military. He would also knew a lot about jazz. He had traveled the world, not only through the military, but for pleasure after college. He could quote Shakespeare. He knew what wine to pair with cheese, and he could build and fix just about anything. He set an amazing example of what a man could and should be, and I spent most of my life aspiring to be like him. That was until one day he slid me a newspaper article, and that changed everything forever. At the time, it was 1999, and I was 21 years old, and I was working in an Italian restaurant called Castelli's. I'd been working there for 5 years. I had worked my way up from lowly dishwasher to line cook, and I absolutely loved it. I was going to college at the time. I was working there at night, but I'll tell you, every minute I spent in the kitchen, I loved cooking. I loved the lifestyle, the noise, the heat, the waitresses and waiters doing cocaine, sliding me absolute vodka and cranberries while I cranked out chicken parms and spaghetti carbonaras. Now, this was a lifestyle that I was becoming addicted to, but at the same time, it was the dot-com boom of the late 90s. And you weren't supposed to work in a restaurant. You were supposed to finish your college degree and go on and make a lot of money. I remember one morning I was sitting with my father, and he slid an article towards me. We were having coffee in the breakfast room that he had built. And he had slid this article across to me titled, "Don't Eat Before Reading This," by an unknown chef by the name of Anthony Bourdain. Don't get sad. It's not a sad story. So I remember my father leaned over and told me, he goes, "Look, I'm your father, and I know my son." He goes, "You are not made for a 9-to-5 job. There's nothing about you that screams 9 to 5. It'll kill your soul. You're a damn good cook. You're a damn good writer, and you don't need a 4-year college degree to do both." And I remember I got up from the table, and I walked away, and I read this article. And man, it changed my life. It was the same way I felt when I first heard the opening chords of Smells Like Teen Spirit from Nirvana. Like, that's how much of an impact it had on me. And here was this man who was speaking very eloquently about a job that most people hated and just looked down upon. And not only that, the article itself was incendiary, and it was such an expose of the norms of, and the back end things that happen in a restaurant that few know about. Nobody ever spoke like this about the food industry. And it was very revealing to me. And then I realized in that moment, looks like I have a new hero. I did. I was like, "See ya, Pop, you're gone." Yeah, it was. And Anthony Bourdain had become my hero just through one article, one shared newspaper clipping. Do you remember when people did that? People cut out newspapers and handed it to you. Now it's like, "Oh, here's a link from BuzzFeed." So I remember I was reading this, and I was just so in love with this man after reading everything he had to say about he was sticking up for people like me, line cooks and dishwashers and guys. He gave us a voice. And a few months later, Kitchen Confidential came out. And me and all the guys and girls in the restaurant, we poured over that thing like it was this Zapruder film. Like, we leaned into that. We studied the pages like it was the Talmud. We loved this book because it spoke to our life, and it made us proud, and it gave us a sense of purpose. But that wasn't enough for me to stay in that life. I wanted to, but alas, I had succumbed to so many peer pressures about what you should do with your life that after about a decade in the business, I left, mostly due to exhaustion and wanting health insurance and maybe a date on a Friday night. But as luck would have it, about 15 years later, I would be 38 years old, and I'd find myself divorced and very unhappy with my life. And the advice that my brother would give me when he was driving me back from divorce court, he said, "Dude, blow up your life and change it." And I did. I went out and I started performing stand-up comedy and storytelling. I wrote a book about Wawa. It was a little bit of a regional hit. And it begat a book deal. Humble brag against my high school enemy. Humble brag. Because he will see this on the internet and I want him to rue the day. Rue the day he made fun of my polka dot pants. MC Hammer wore them. So it got me thinking that now that I have this career that maybe delusionally, that Anthony Bourdain would read something that I wrote and he would come to Philadelphia and the two of us would trapeze around town and we would take in all the delights in the humanity, us two writers and culinary refugees. And then I would take him to Chur's in Port Richmond and I'd get the pierogies and the kielbasa that I used to eat as a child that my father would make for me and that his mother and aunt made for him and so on and so forth. And I would blow him away with my culinary skill. And then after the meal, I would look to him and I would tell him how much I regretted not staying in the restaurant business, how much I lamented it. And I would go on and on about how I feel like I didn't make the right choice. And he would listen intently. And then as I was done ranting, I would take out a cigarette. And he would look at me and he would carefully consider all of his history, light the cigarette and say, no, you made the right choice. You guys ready to get the show started?